Peace is not a favor you do to the other. It's a savior you do to yourself.
Welcome to Making Peace Visible, the podcast about peace, conflict, and the media. I'm your host, Jamil Simon. Nonviolent peace activist Ali Abu Awad has worked for decades to establish international peace-building movements. In 2016, he brought his focus on nonviolence to building a national nonviolent movement of Palestinian people. He co-founded the Tagir movement, which means change in Arabic. The work he does promoting nonviolence in Israel and Palestine has become one of the hardest jobs imaginable, especially now following the strike by Hamas against Israel and the war in Gaza that has continued for almost a year. Ali and I have something special in common. We're both winners of the Luxembourg Peace Prize. Ali was awarded his prize for peace activism in 2023 and for the work he's been doing to promote peace in Israel and Palestine. I won mine in 2019 for peace journalism, for the work I'm doing to provoke a new approach to reporting on peace and conflict. Ali is living in the world where the idea of peace feels like a fairy tale, but he remains passionate in his belief in the power of nonviolence, and he continues to promote it despite the ongoing war. I spoke with Ali in May 2024. I opened the interview with a quote of his from an op-ed published in the Daily Beast last year, about a week after the October 7th attacks. He wrote, "Many people today are being led by their emotions and their pain. I understand that challenge all too well. Like so many caught up in this conflict, I'm torn in pieces by the inner struggle between my Palestinian national identity and my belonging to all humanity." Then I asked Ali to elaborate on that.
You know, this land hosts different identities. My Palestinian national identity can thrive and can live better when the Jewish identity also is recognized and safe, and vice versa. This land as a mother of all of us, whether we like it or not, none of us is going to disappear from this land. And the history and the narrative of both sides is painful. We end up in this land together with all of our bleeding history. But our mission is to practice who we are in a fashion that no one should pay the price of his dignity, freedom, or security because of the dignity, freedom, or security of the other.
You know, one very important distinction you've made in talks that I've heard you give is the distinction between identity and behavior. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, that's an important one because the conflict will start to end when we stop arguing each other identities, but also arguing and trying to solve each other behaviors. Because occupation, violence are behaviors. This is not who are the Jews. And this is not who we are as Palestinians. Jews and Palestinians has built other countries. The whole world benefit and still benefiting from both of us. We should be more clever to build our own home and to build our own countries in this land. So to recognize other identity will bring us to the situation where we can trust the other, but also where we can trust ourselves. Because when my freedom will start, it should not be a threat on Jewish people. When Jewish people want to secure themselves, it should not be at the expense of my freedom.
Oh, it sounds so simple. and in some ways it really is. You know, in some ways it really is simple. But getting there is a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge because people still led by emotions. I mean, the Jewish fear has become our biggest enemies as Palestinians. There is a lot of fear there. And fear in Israel today is managing politics. And it has become a resource in the hand of right-wing leaders So this fear has to be healed. And the only one to deal with that fear is the Palestinian nonviolence uprising. Because in one hand, we can say that you're going to be secure, but also we can resist injustices. Our nonviolence will be the reflection of our human identity more than the threat of our political independence.
Yeah. There's a leap of imagination that seems to be required on both sides to make that possible, to make both sides feel secure and to make both sides feel like their identities are intact and to change their behaviors.
Listen, nonviolence is not a fantasy. It's one of the most hardest jobs that you can do. The easiest way is just to throw out your anger in any way and find someone guilty and act as a victim. We have been doing this for decades, and look at what are the consequences. None of us is free and none of us is secure. Number two, we need to shift the relation with the land from ownership to belonging. No one owns the land, but we all belong to it. The minute we recognize that, we're going to establish a framework that will guarantee that belonging in a fashion that we will all thrive and live without this trauma. And no one is giving us this trauma. We create it by ourselves. Jews and Arabs on this land are creating the same trauma that they are causing each other. That's why it's a hard job, because in nonviolence, we should look on the mirror. In violence, you don't need a mirror. You don't need to see yourself.
You obliterate the mirror.
Exactly. But no one want to say that he is guilty. It's the easiest way to act as victim and to try to justify all of violence acts against the other. These are politicians, but leaders will not do such thing, because politicians are managers of reality. Leaders are designers of future.
I love that distinction, because I think that's what's missing is the vision, a vision of how it could work. We need leaders. We need real leaders.
Definitely. We need leaders. We need commitment of a grassroots as well. We need a plan that will describe the vision, the mission, the task, and also the homework. There is a lot of homework to be done in each side. It's not just about meeting each other and having hummus together. This is not what I'm doing. It's the opposite. It's actually sometimes to argue historical facts and to change them. And I always said that dialogue is not fantasy, but dialogue is the secure place for argument, not necessarily an agreement. Because if we feel secure to argue, we will definitely feel secure to agree, but we don't feel secure in anything.
Tell us a little bit about how you grew up and how you developed your own political awareness.
I was born to a leader. My mother, she was one of the leaders of PLO, Fatima Youssef. She served years in Israeli prison for her political activities against the Israeli occupation. I always missed her. And it didn't take me a minute to participate in the first Intifada when I was 15 years old, throwing stones on soldiers, trying to raise my voice that the world can hear that we don't deserve to be occupied. And I end up in prison. Actually, in 1990, I was arrested with my mother. She served 4 years in prison, and I served 4 years as well. And we were released by Oslo Peace Initiative. And as leaders of Fatah movement who signed the initiative with Israel, we were encouraging people for peace because we were hoping to have our own independent state. But this didn't happen. What happened in reality was the opposite. We still could see settlements expand. We could see violence, suicide bombers, occupation, checkpoints. And the weakness of the Palestinian Authority because of the aggressive behaviors of the occupation and because of also the corruption within the authority itself. So it failed. It failed with a second intifada in 2000, where I was badly wounded by a settler. And during that time, I lost my brother, Yusuf, 31 years old. He was stopped and very violently killed by Israeli soldiers. And in that minute, I have to face a hard exam that I faced before, because the first encounter with nonviolence actually happens to me in prison when me and my mother, both of us, had a hunger strike for 17 days in our prisons just to meet each other, where we succeed after 17 days of starvation. Then I was my political mind was totally transformed and open about nonviolence. Then when I lost my brother in 2000, I have to examine myself again. Am I willing now to not to take revenge? Am I willing to think about any reconciliation?
That's such an important question.
Yeah, because in general, when this happened to someone, this question doesn't jump to your mind. All what jumps to people's mind is revenge. I mean, the one who did such a crime deserves to die, or someone from his people deserve punishment. And, people seek for justice. What could be justice in this case? But I don't think that there is full justice after such thing. Anyway, I was struggling between, believing on revenge or giving up revenge, it's hard. Especially my reality is the same, even more tough. The occupation has not ended. I could face any other soldier who could threaten me or justify the killing of my brother. And how do I deal with that? Until one day, 1 year after, my mother actually hosted a group of Israeli parents who have lost someone in the conflicts. And believe me, Jamil, until that minute, I couldn't believe even that Jewish people have tears or have humanity, until I saw a Jewish mother holding my mother's hand, and they both cried with the same colors of tears. My world went upside down that minute. I realized that first, I'm not the only victim on earth. Number two, Jews are not devils. They are humans like us. Yes, we're not equal in life conditions, but we are equal in this pain.
In this pain, exactly. I've heard you say that people fear solutions, that they fear peace. How does that fear manifest itself?
When especially Jewish people in Israel, when they feel surrounded and there is a desire to attack them from any side, any minute, anywhere, they just lock themselves and live with that feeling that manage their life, fear. They have to be strong. They have to be secure. By the end of the day, they don't achieve security. Any other solution will become a threat. So they would prefer to stay with these threats than taking the risk of peace. Peace is risky.
It is.
It is. Because, this risk means is to give up, not just to give up land. It's also to give up beliefs. Beliefs of that there is no place for the other or the other is the devil. This has to disappear. We need to welcome the other. We need to recognize the other. The other could be our best ally for life, our best partner. But even though, in the worst case, even though the other will not be our partner, it doesn't mean that we need to control him. We can be good neighbors or bad neighbors. There are so many bad neighbors around the world. I mean, I always say, if we love each other, this is the best. But if we don't love each other, if we don't like each other, this is not the end. We still can have respect. We still can act in a responsible way for ourselves. So peace is not a favor you do to the other. It's a task. It's a savior you do to yourself. And that's why nonviolence can work, because the Palestinian nonviolence approach will target that fear, not the people. And I said that million times, and I keep saying that my freedom as a Palestinian will not be built on Jewish graves. It has to pass through Jewish hearts, not bodies. The minute we believe on that, it happened. And I promise you, Jamil, that there is enough humanity within the other side, within ourselves as Palestinians, for nonviolence to succeed.
I sincerely hope that you're right about that. I mean, the thing is, it's not the message that we're hearing from either Palestinian leaders or from Israeli leaders. I mean, it's mostly the fear that we're hearing, not the conviction that there could be a common ground for people.
I mean, look at Gaza today. This is the consequences of the failure of the peace process. It's not the consequences of the fanatic beliefs in both sides. We're not fanatics, not us, not the Jews, but we have bad leaders. And we have leaders that their resource is hatred and fear. When we change that, when we force our leaders to change the status quo, to change the speech, to change the management, many things can change. But as long as the advocacy for political position based on hatred, you will see just war and conflict. That will be just the consequences. For now, Israel can fight. For now, Palestinian Hamas can resist. But look what is the result. The result, we have more graves, more suffering.
More destruction.
Yeah, exactly. And how much needs to heal all of that? So I would rather invest in building than investing in healing.
But, you know, one thing you said was that, you know, the peace process needs a political umbrella. What does that mean? Tell me how it works.
Three things. We need a movement on the ground in Israel and in Palestine, not even jointly, because it's a homework. It's a one-side job for each side. Number two, we need an engagement of political leadership and change of leaders. And we need an international umbrella for these approaches to succeed. We need the world not to take sides. We need the US government, especially, to play a realistic, equal role to both sides. We need Europe. We need China. We need Russia. We need Iran. Everyone not to intervene in our conflict, but to partner with us. We need the Arabs who are normalizing, big part of them, normalizing their relation with Israel without the Palestinian. We definitely need normalization, but we need a dignified normalization that will allow people to identify with the process, not to be ashamed of it, not to be a threat on Arab leaders because of the occupation where their people will resist them or accuse them of normalization. I need to be proud of walking the walk with a Jewish partner, not to be ashamed or afraid of normalization. And there is a lot of criticism against any joint efforts, and you know that, and the world know that. So leaders like me needs to be courageous, more courageous, because as I told you, peace is a painful approach. Leaders could pay the price of their life, and this happens in this land.
It has happened. That's true.
And we need both sides to realize one fact. This is the only place where we both can exist. This is the only place where we both belong.
All 14 million of you.
Exactly. And none of us is going to go away. Actually, the world doesn't want us. If Jewish people think that the Arabs want the Palestinians, they should learn from the history of the Palestinians with the Arab. If we think that the world wants the Jews, we should also have a lesson in history, what happened to Jews. So These are facts, not from a peacemaker, but from a realistic leader who see reality as it is. That's what we need.
Ali, now I'd like to ask you about Tagir, the Palestinian grassroots nonviolence movement that you lead. A few years ago, before you started Tagir, you co-founded a joint Palestinian-Israeli peace initiative called Roots. I'd love to hear about why you made this transition from the bilateral work that you used to do to the work you do now, which takes place within the Palestinian community.
I spent years in joint work, and I toured the world with Israeli speakers, Israeli activists. I have been to so many places in Israel, giving my presentations. I spoke in every university, hundreds, even thousands of classrooms for Jewish students to hear the story of the Palestinian for the first time. And I end up realizing that there is a homework also to be done. There is a huge confusion in the Palestinian community between two identities. And let me explain that. I'm explaining this because I want the people who hear this to understand why, what is the Palestinian situation, and why nonviolence Palestinian national movements can be the solution. Before Oslo Peace Initiative, we used to identify with revolution. If you are a good Palestinian, you sacrifice for the land. You resist Israel. You attack Israel. You reject Israel. This is how to be a good Palestinian. After Oslo Peace Initiative, there is a new identity, which is citizenship, not resistance. But this citizenship has not been achieved. So we become so confused. Are we fighting Israel, or we are having peace with Israel because we already achieved our freedom? The failure of Oslo has brought this confusion between the two identities. So in one hand, you will see a Palestinian and an Israeli speaking peace, acting for peace. But on the other hand, there are two different realities. When you go to Tel Aviv, it's not exactly the same conditions in Jenin refugee camp. So for me, dealing with that confusion means that in one hand, we still need to resist the occupation, and we need as well to build our society and create the resources and the values and the conditions for a future independent democratic state. Resisting the occupation will be non-violently, and actually it's not resisting the occupation. I don't want to resist the occupation. I want to end the occupation. There is a big difference. Resistance is not my goal. My goal is to create a framework that will replace the occupation, that will take care of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian society, the Palestinian state, and the security of Israel. So this approach has led me to create Tagir as a national Palestinian movement and to start targeting, in a way.
It's hard to get away from military metaphors sometimes.
Engaging community leaders, people who served years in prison, people who led the Intifada, people with high position in their community, not necessarily high position in the political system. Because leaders with high position in the society are much more respected than politicians in my community. And start advocating for non-violence approach that will deal with that confusion that I just explained, and then collect many leaders. And we have a project called Messengers of Change. We have messengers on the ground, community leaders, men and women and youth, who lead the nonviolence activism after we train them in workshops, but also in practice with massive events, but also different community initiatives. Dealing with the victim mentality, like example, what is the connection between occupation and trash on our streets? As we collect sometimes people garbage emotionally, we also collect physical trash, because if we want to see independent, we need to act in a responsible way. The other project is nonviolence labs in some schools. We got the support of the US Embassy actually, and we created labs in 3 schools. And now we have a curriculum and a physical lab for nonviolence. So students will have a place to learn about nonviolence, but also to practice it. And then hopefully, recently, we started engaging the official authority to have such curriculum in our national curriculum as part of it.
I think it's enormous. It's one of the things that excites me when I read about the work your organization does, because, you know, you've made conflict resolution education as part of civic education as a very important element in your program. I feel that, you know, teaching young people these skills is critical to our global survival. How has this work been received where you've implemented these kinds of programs of teaching conflict resolution skills?
I have to tell you that the work is led by leaders. These are not normalizers. And the one good thing that we don't have an Israeli partner, actually, it's strengthened us in our community, because there is a lot of criticism about normalization. So Tahrir doesn't work with Israeli organizations. Tahrir is an independent DNA Palestinian movement. So people feel secure with it. Number 2, it's hard because these kids are facing a tough reality against any normal dream for life. But when you educate them that nonviolence is not fantasy, actually it's a hard job to do, then they take it as a resource to solve their problems and to end the occupation.
As a challenge almost.
Exactly. So they don't feel traitors. So we're not like just replacing physical weapons. Actually, we're dealing with the blindness to see the real weapon, which is our humanity. This is our real weapon. And it's not just our weapon. Actually, our real weapon as well is the Jewish humanity. But for Jewish Israeli humanity to be seen, they need our humanity to get it out. And this is the philosophy of nonviolence activism. So many kids has changed their life. I mean, there is one kid that we discovered for 1 year. He was telling his friends, his family, his neighbors, and foreigners who visit his schools about my story of transformation. He's one of my heroes. So this is an experience where he say, today I feel alive again because I have understood what nonviolence means, which I describe it as the celebration of our existence. Nonviolence gives us that meaning of living every day instead of being the victims mourning in the graves of our beloved ones.
That's a very powerful way of describing it. I think we could talk about it for a long time, but there's one aspect that it's important from our standpoint to talk about, and that's the role of the news media. Do you think that there is a willingness on the part of journalists and the news media more generally to communicate this part of the story?
Yeah, I do feel that mostly by international media, but also I have to say that media can be your best friend or your worst enemy. I was talking to a group of Israelis and one lady said, but Ali, we do everything. By the end of the day, you see in the media, not such meeting. You see just hatred, blood, advocacy for one side. And then I told her the best way to deal with such news is to create your own news. I mean, the minute we will become massive, the media will be forced to cover that. And the minute we will become truthful, the media will grab us because we will become sexy. We need to be a magnetic for media. And media here has been political more than politicians themselves. Because we have to understand where this media comes from and who support this media. So media will go on in their own approach, but the minute that two nations will decide to live free, secure, and reconcile, no one can ignore that.
But, to some extent, everybody has their own media. We have a phrase that it's siloed, that it's, people are just living inside an echo chamber almost. Is that something that you see on both sides, or do you see a willingness to talk about the nuance in between? Or
listen, there is always willingness, and there are great initiatives, and there are great challenges as well. Even as a movement, for the last year, we face huge challenges because when you grow, that attention is more on you. You have to have the best management, the best leadership, the best mechanism. These are not easy things to achieve. And since we are a Palestinian movement, we don't have a Jewish partner. It's hard also to create resources because people around the world want to see hope. They want to see individuals or activists hugging each other, giving them hope. This is not going to work this way. It is important to have both sides, but it's more important that each side will take responsibility. For me, there are efforts from media, but the challenges are huge. There is a lot of criticism and there is, attacks on activists sometimes. And we should not fall on this trap of political media to advocate for whatever it is. And even in nonviolence, sometimes even nonviolence people still speak hatred. When you take nonviolence just as a weapon to embarrass the other, this is not the nonviolence that I believe.
In a sense, looking at the political side, it's very clear that the leaders on both sides of the conflict have failed their people. If you could imagine new leadership for Palestinians, what would that look like?
I can see an important role for women, and Tahrir has hundreds of women as leaders. I can see the new generation much more has belonging, but also opening to the other and to their self, but they just need a new reality. I am not optimistic about the recent leadership. There is also a huge interior conflict between political parties, the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, the Islamic parties. It's hard also to manage a society without having it a state, having it become a state. On one hand, we vote, we have government, but it's not exactly a government, it's an authority. So it's hard for the authority to keep the respect from its people without having authority. And having authority means having independence. And this is an opportunity also for others who want to destroy any peaceful efforts. There is a lot to be done. So before speaking about who, we should speak about what kind of system we need and who's going to lead that. I see a unity within my society to become as one national approach non-violently, who will also position some good leaders and also force for a peaceful agreement.
Are you interested in a role in government yourself?
Yes, but not for now. And I'll tell you why. What is more important now for Palestine is to have the framework, the national role, the plan before the position. It's easy for someone like me with a credit and with some support from abroad and here just to position myself. But this is not the solution. Career role is not also to become a political party as well. We don't need more political parties. We need a national movement. And after, hopefully, the peaceful agreement, we should turn to become a political party to secure the agreement. That's how do I see it. And when people ask, But come on, you are just one, or you just movement, just organization. I always say that we are the active minority that represent the big silent majority. We need to activate that majority because in both sides, the majority want peace yesterday, but they are not active. We need to activate them.
Something has to change. I think that trauma is a very important part of it. The history of trauma on both sides is something that generates so much of the energy and the anger and the hatred. That's a very hard thing to change.
Well, if we look at the history, many countries has changed. Many nations has dealt with their own trauma that has been created by others or by themselves. Look at Ireland today. I cannot say it's fully peaceful and everything is okay. No, but there is a huge investment from the whole world and from the US, but also from the people of Ireland to get rid of that trauma and to design the best future. And many other countries. Who could even imagine that in Europe, that you will be crossing from country to country without anyone stopping you? Who could imagine that? Even in Israel and Palestine. If you would have told me before that I will be talking about the Jewish identity to be recognized 30 years ago, I would tell you, you have lost your mind. No way. And after all what I have been through, if I am ready to partner, to recognize the legitimate existence of my enemies, everyone can, with all the prices that me and my family and my people has paid and still pay. So there is hope. But hope without desire for change is nothing.
Ali, it's been a privilege to talk to you and a pleasure as well.
Thank you. I'm honored, Jamil, to speak to you. And I do speaking tours, hopefully to meet you in person. And I hope that many people will listen to this. And I don't carry a weapon. My weapon is my heart, but also my enemy's heart as well. That's what I'm carrying.
You can learn more about Ali Abu Awad at aliabuawad.com. We also have links to some of his writing and to his movement, Tagir, in the show notes. If I do get to meet Ali in person, and I hope I do, I'll be posting about it on our social media. You can find us on X at Making Peace Viz, that's V-I-Z, and on LinkedIn and Instagram at Making Peace Visible. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who you think might appreciate it too. You can send them to our website, makingpeacevisible.org/podcast, or just take a screenshot wherever you're listening to this and send it as a text. You are our best resource for growing this show. A friend of mine recently told me that the sheer number of people and organizations working in the peace-building field in Israel and Palestine is one of the world's best-kept secrets. Next time on the podcast, we'll speak to another remarkable peace builder who's working on shared environmental issues in the region. David Lehrer is a leader with the Arava Institute, an NGO that brings Palestinians, Israelis, and Jordanians together to learn about and manage shared resources. They're also playing an important humanitarian role in the Gaza war. That's coming up in 2 weeks. Making Peace Visible is produced by Andrea Moraskin with help from Faith McClure. I'm Jamil Simon. Thanks so much for listening and talk soon.